Alrighty then, so we have our next project. This one is thanks to Rochester RC. They have sent us the XV02 RS Pro. Rally ready apparently, but it's the race spec kit. Really looking forward to getting inside the box and getting this car up and running. Now, we've also got this one here, which is the XV01 chassis, which has all been built up and made. So this is, yes, it was a nice build actually. So once I have finished building the XV02, we can compare the XV01 with the XV02 and look at the differences, similarities, because there are quite a few differences between these two chassis. Anyway, enough waffle. Let's get on with the build. So it's worth noting actually, as I open up this box, that this kit doesn't have a shell with it, doesn't have a motor, doesn't have an ESC. Whereas with the XV01, it came with motor, ESC, and therefore all I had to add was the servo and receiver. Whereas with this kit, I'm going to need a full lot of electrics, motor, ESC, and then I need to get myself a shell. So I've just had a little route around and found in one of my other cars, which I'm not using at the moment, a receiver, a servo, and an ESC. So I'm going to throw these in it for now. So that's a 1060 brushed setup. It might be that this car ends up being a brushless car, but that's going to be my go-to to start with, because I have also got over here, again out of another car, we have got the just stock ESC, so I could actually go with a brushless motor in there. This is censored ESC as well, so maybe a 21 turn brushless or a 17.5 turn. Not totally sure, but I've got different electrics that I could put in this car. Interestingly, with this car, we're not starting by building the diffs. We're starting with the chassis, so we've got a few little bits to build, get this chassis together, steering Arrma, and then we get onto the diffs, which will fill, and the arms. It's all looking quite good so far. Nice. Okay. It's always worth, when you're doing builds like this, is to have a little scan through the manual before you start. It'll give you an idea of what you're going with. As you can see here, we've got two prop shafts for running this car, as opposed to actually the last car, the XV01, was belt driven. So this is very different in terms of layout. Motor set up there. Let's get started on the build. Now, as far as Tamiya builds go, this was actually a real pleasure, because it's a pro kit. The spec of some of the parts is just a little bit high. You can see here, it already comes with some anodized blue parts. This is for mounting the servo, which we get in nice and early, and also the screws as well. Rather than being like the old Phillips crosshead screwdrivers, we have got hex drive screws on this, so it just goes together much nicer. Again, going through the motions, it's important to make sure you get all of the lengths right on the turnbuckles. However, once I've built the car together, I'll be sort of tweaking these to make sure the car's set up properly. Everything is just so smooth. I know with the TT01, the TT02, there's a lot of slop in the steering mechanism, but with this, it all went through nicely. Another thing with this car as well, as part of the diff, you could actually set two different gear sizes. So you've got 39 tooth or you've got a 40 tooth. So that can change the gear ratio from the front wheels and the back wheels. I opted to keep both exactly the same and built up these diffs nicely. They are oil filled diffs, and I opted to go with slightly thicker oil. Now, it took far too long for me to get these pins into these diffs. what can I say? They are quite frustrating. Not the most frustrating part of the build, but definitely up there with frustrating, that's for sure. Again, the diffs come with plastic gears, and it all goes together very nicely. When you're building up the arms like this, there's some little spacers that need to go in there to make sure you get those the right way round. But it all just goes together really simply, just following the instructions. It all kind of just falls into place. The diffs are held in place quite nicely. What you do at the front, you kind of repeat at the back. You need to make sure that everything's moving freely and nothing's binding. And then we've got the gear that goes into the center. Now, one thing I did do wrong is putting in these little wire clips. I managed to put them in the wrong way round on the drive shafts as well. But once they're in, that holds the pins in place and keeps everything sturdy. At this point, it says I should be putting the motor in. However, I haven't actually got a motor just yet to go in the car. Looking at the towers for the XV02, you can see here with the Pro kit, it comes with the additional carbon fiber towers, which we will be putting on the car. So they are sort of geometry wise very similar, just again it's one of the upgrades that's included in the kit. More turnbuckles, it's important to get those the right way round, and again just double check as you're putting all these parts together to make sure they all move freely. Right, having a little look at the electrics, I've got myself a Spectrum receiver, I've got myself a Hobby Wing ESC, which is very similar to the Hobby Wing 1080. I've got myself an eTronics servo. None of this has actually been fitted in just yet because what I need to do is put my motor in. And I've just found, this is actually an old one, it's been run before, a Core 21, which is in line with the iconic Cup spec TT01s that we run at the local club. And as I intend to run this in that class, I am going to stick with a Core 21. The only issue I have is the wires from the ESC are not quite long enough. So I've got a couple of bits of wire here, which I'm going to solder in and get this all soldered in. Now, if you're regular to the channel, you will know that I'm not the best solderer in the world. However, I did quite a reasonable job of soldering these links. It's important though not to leave the metal exposed, so therefore get some heat shrink. Now, I could have used a lighter just to heat the heat shrink up, but I tend to just give it a little rub with the soldering iron as it's already warm and it tightens up quite nicely. So doing it in this order, it was a little bit of a challenge to get this to mesh up properly, but it's pretty much done now. What we've got is a cover to cover that up. So we've got a couple of screws to put in here, and then we can start on the servo, and the electrics are done. So I've extended the wires around to the ESC. Servo's down here. We've got our receiver. Interestingly, on this one, the battery slots in this way as opposed to being down flat, so the weight is going to be slightly higher up. It's going to be interesting. I've got to be honest, I am not convinced with the battery tray. It is a little bit loose. There's too much movement there, so I might have to get some foam to make that fit. Okay, so when it comes to building shocks, what I like to do is get everything out ready. I'm going to build these up 4 at a time. I'm just going to go through the process. And then when it comes to filling up oil, I am going to choose some slightly different oil, because this is the oil that comes in the kit. So I always find building the shocks, it's quite a therapeutic little project actually. Quite straightforward. So the most annoying part of all shocks is these little E-clips. They can be a real pain in the backside. So what I tend to do is I put the first one in situ and then just push it down. So that one's now in place. And I'll do that to all of them. So as I say, I'll just repeat the process 4 times. And then once the process has been repeated 4 times, put that down on there. So, sorry, the piston with the holes, that goes on the top, and then comes the trickier part. What we do is we take that, we put that on the top, that goes on there like so. And that clips on there. So I haven't built TRF shocks in a very, very long time. I do really like TRF shocks. I think they're really nicely machined, they just go together so smoothly, so nicely. The shocks that I tend to use are actually the racing ones, because they are very similar but a fraction of the price. So what we've got now is we've got our pistons on there. Next up, we need to put a spacer in each of these, which goes in like so. There it is. And then, so in the kit, it's worth noting there were 2 types of little O-ring. We've got these ones, which are the clear ones, and they go on here. Oh, I dropped it. They go on here. The black one actually goes inside the shock. So we'll just push those on top. And then the last part that goes on is this spacer now, or washer. Now the thing is with this one is you can just about make out there's a little ridge on this side, and that's flat on that side. So you want the ridge facing out, because the bit that sticks out will come into this little hole here. So we want the lumpy bit pointing out on all of these. And there's that one there. So now that they're done, we can screw these back on. So that's the first half of the shock done and dusted. Next up, we need to put the bottoms on. Then we're going to start putting some oil in them. So there are lots of different options for oils. What I tend to use is kind of somewhere between 400 and 500 CST. There's the 400. We've got the 475, which is the one that I use most of the time. There's the 500. So yeah, 475 I think it will be for this one. Again, when you're putting your oil in, you need to pump the shocks to get rid of all the air bubbles, then let them rest. And once you've got rid of all the air bubbles, you can put the sort of, what's this called? Diaphragm on. and then you top it and then put the cap on the top, and your shocks are then ready for springs. So springs complete, car is pretty much complete, just the bumper and body posts to put on now. I've checked the ride height, it's sitting at about 5mm, which is ideal for the carpet racing I intend to do. In terms of tyres, I haven't gone with the stock tyres. I am running a set of Contact A30s, which are they're the cheap carpet car tyres.